You think your neighborhood is peaceful until the woman who runs it like a personal dictatorship pulls into your driveway and demands you to tail her Mercedes for free. When you say no, she dials 911 and tells the cops you're dangerous. What she didn't know was that the quiet new guy she picked on had been watching, recording, and waiting for the perfect moment to flip the script. The houses on Maple Grove Estates looked like they belonged in a magazine, manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, American flags waving in perfect synchronization. Everyone smiled and waved. But the moment you stepped inside the invisible fence of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, the air got thick. 3-inch grass maximum. No political signs bigger than a postcard. Trash cans hidden by 8 p.m. Or else. And at the center of it all sat Patricia Pat Donnelly, HOA president for 9 glorious years. The smiling enforcer who spoke in honeyed tones about community standards while her eyes scanned for the next violation. Ethan Brooks had moved in 6 months earlier after his divorce, looking for a quiet place to raise his daughter and run his mobile car detailing business out of the garage. He kept his head down, paid his dues on time, and tried to ignore the endless emails about proper holiday lighting protocols. He was the guy who nodded politely at block parties but left early. The kind of neighbor people described as nice but distant. Pat saw that distance as defiance. It was a bright Saturday morning when the trouble started. Ethan was in his driveway, finishing up a detail on his own truck, windows down, music low, when Pat's white Mercedes GLS rolled up like she owned the pavement. She stepped out in pressed khakis and a pastel polo, the HOA logo embroidered on the chest like a sheriff's badge. "Ethan, darling," she began, voice syrupy sweet. "I noticed you do such lovely work. The board is hosting our annual spring mixer next weekend. And my car is just dreadful after that pollen storm. I was thinking you could give it a full interior and exterior, complimentary. Of course. Previous owners always helped the HOA leadership. It's just how we keep the community spirit alive." Ethan wiped his hands on a microfiber towel and kept his tone even. "Morning, Mrs. Donnelly. I appreciate the compliment, but I run a business. Rates are on my website, full detail starts at $249. Pat's smile didn't move, but something behind her eyes clicked like a loaded chamber. "You're new here, so let me explain how things work. As president, I handle a lot for everyone. A little professional courtesy goes a long way. You wouldn't want your first year to be uncomfortable, would you?" He smiled back, calm as still water. "I'm happy to book you for next Tuesday at the regular rate." That's when the mask slipped. Pat pulled out her phone, thumb jabbing the screen like she was summoning the apocalypse. "This is Patricia Donnelly at 1422, Maple Grove. I need police assistance. There's a man here being extremely hostile and threatening me. I don't feel safe." The call went through. Ethan just stood there, arms loose at his sides, while she performed for the invisible jury. When she hung up, she crossed her arms and gave him the look of someone who'd just won a war that hadn't even started. 8 minutes later a cruiser pulled up. Officer Ramirez stepped out, already looking tired. Pat launched into her greatest hits, aggressive tone, refusal of service, possible discrimination against community leaders. Ethan waited until she finished, then pointed to the 4 cameras mounted around his garage. "Officer, everything's recorded, video and audio. You're welcome to review it right now." Ramirez glanced at Pat, then at Ethan, and sighed the sigh of a man who'd answered too many HOA calls. He didn't even pull out his notebook. Pat tried to spin it as just documenting for the records, but the damage was done. She climbed back into her Mercedes. Windows tinted so dark they swallowed her whole. And drove off with a little more gas than necessary. That should have been the end of it. It was only the beginning. The first fine arrived 4 days later, $154 failure to maintain curb appeal because 2 dandelions had dared to appear near the mailbox. The second came a week after that, $200 for leaving his garage door open an excessive amount of time while he was actively working. Then the rumors started. At the community pool. Moms suddenly stopped chatting when Ethan and his daughter walked by. His regular detailing clients from the neighborhood began canceling with vague excuses. One even admitted Pat had mentioned concerns about reliability. Ethan didn't yell. He didn't post on the neighborhood Facebook page. He simply started a folder on his laptop titled Timeline. Every fine. Every email. Every whispered conversation he caught wind of went in there. Time-stamped and backed up to the cloud. He began chatting quietly with a few long-time residents who'd been fined into submission over the years, Mrs. Alvarez whose bird feeder was non-compliant, old Mr. Hayes who got hit for painting his front door the wrong shade of beige. They all told the same story, Pat ruled by fear. And her husband's construction company somehow always won the HOA maintenance bids. One night, after putting his daughter to bed, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with a stack of HOA financial summaries a sympathetic former treasurer had slipped him. The numbers didn't add up. Over $87,000 paid to Donnelly Property Solutions in the last 3 years for emergency repairs that no one remembered happening. The clubhouse roof was still leaking. The community sign still had the same cracked post. Ethan smiled for the first time in weeks. Not a nice smile. He kept playing the long game. He collected signatures for a formal audit petition under the bylaws. He recorded every new violation notice. When another anonymous one-star review appeared on his business page calling him rude and unprofessional, he saved the screenshot and added it to the file. His detailing bookings from outside the neighborhood actually went up. Word travels when people sense a story brewing. The tension built like a summer storm that refuses to break. Pat started looking rattled at the monthly meetings. Her usual scripted speeches about unity came out sharper. More defensive. She pushed through a new rule about excessive noise from power equipment before 9 a.m., which just happened to include pressure washers. Ethan's garage stayed suspiciously quiet those mornings. He was too busy building his case. Then came the night of the emergency community meeting. 87 residents packed the clubhouse, more than had shown up in years. Pat sat at the head table in her power pastel, flanked by her 2 loyal board members. Looking every inch the gracious leader. Ethan stood at the back near the projector he'd set up earlier. When the floor opened for new business, he walked forward calmly. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. Voice steady. "I'm here because Article 12 allows any group of 15% of homeowners to request a financial review. We have 29 signatures. Tonight I'd like to share what that review has already uncovered." He clicked the first slide, security footage from his driveway. The entire room watched Pat demand free work. Then dramatically call the police while Ethan stood perfectly still. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone actually laughed, an ugly, relieved kind of laugh. Pat's face went from confident to crimson in seconds. That footage is taken out of context. He was aggressive. "Ma'am." "The audio is crystal clear," Ethan replied mildly. Next slide, bank statements and invoices. Payments to her husband's company for work that Google Maps and time-stamped photos proved had never been done. The room got very quiet. Then very loud. Pat shot to her feet. Voice cracking. "This is a witch hunt. I have given everything to this community." Ethan didn't raise his voice. "You gave them fake invoices and threats. That's not community, that's a grift wearing a pastel polo." The meltdown was glorious. Pat's perfectly coiffed hair started to frizz as she pointed at people, demanding loyalty, reminding everyone how she kept standards high. Residents who had stayed silent for years finally spoke up, stories of fines for holiday lights being too festive, of teenagers getting cited for basketball hoops left out overnight. One woman stood and said, "I paid $800 last year because my rosebush was 6 inches too close to the property line." 6 inches. Pat. By the time the meeting ended, Pat was standing alone at the front table while her board members suddenly remembered urgent appointments. The petition for a full independent audit passed unanimously. Someone started clapping, and the whole room joined in. 3 weeks later, the state investigator showed up. Pat resigned before the report even dropped, 3 sentences. No apology. Her husband's company lost every pending contract in the neighborhood. The new board wiped every outstanding fine, including Ethan's. His detailing business didn't just recover, people drove from 3 towns over just to say they supported the guy who finally said no. Ethan still lives in Maple Grove Estates. His daughter rides her bike without fear of covenant violations. The lawns are still neat, but now they feel like they belong to the people who live there instead of the woman who used to rule them. And every once in a while, when he's detailing a car in the driveway on a sunny Saturday, someone from the neighborhood will walk by, give him a nod, and say, "Thanks for what you did." So tell me, was Ethan the villain for refusing to play along and exposing the corruption? Or was Pat the real Karen who turned community standards into her own little kingdom? Drop your thoughts below. Who was actually in the wrong here?